Now these are the sort of facades which are disappearing. The wooden door, the traditional wooden door which you see so often in the old part of the city. Again, the woodwork here. And this is one of the paintings I did because I was absolutely fascinated, and I went back a few years later and it was gone, which was heartbreaking for me. Next. This was another painting of the same thing, of the same site. Next. These are some of the features which you find in the city, but the little jharukas, the arched door, and the balcony on top, and often you have someone peeping from the top. Next. This was a lovely feature which I found through the gully as I walked. There was a joining room above. So obviously at some stage they decided they must have bought the house across the gully and built this joining room above. But it was quite fascinating to go through it. Next. This was a house which was built in 1920-25. The owner didn't really know. It had the most beautiful courtyard inside, and a lot of our homes in the East, the families have courtyards inside. It's purely for security more than anything else. But there's the wrought iron. The carving was not as fine as you'd find on the doors. But again, you see that same feature once again with the window to look down as to who has come. Next. This was a beautiful home belonging to a very rich Hindu merchant, and this whole house was his home. And at the moment, those of you who are familiar with Bara, the shopping center, you know, for the clothes you go in through this alley, but if you look up, there is this balconies, and there's wrought iron here, and traditionally all houses had a terrace on top, where one room or two rooms, because the summers were spent up on the terrace, and in fact you slept on the terrace, and if the weather was wet, then you moved into the rooms there which had beds always ready for you to use. There were the balconies, and so it's now been divided after partition. Different families came to live here, so it's in a state of great derelict state. Next. Now, one of the sites or mouth-watering sites of Rawalpindi city is Sardar Sujan Singh's residence. The Sikhs, repeatedly you hear of the contribution of the Sikhs to Rawalpindi as a city and the growth. And one of the names, those of you who don't know, but if you'd like history, I would suggest pick up the Gazetteer of Rawalpindi. They're fascinating. They're Gazetteers of Rawalpindi, Peshawar, Lahore, and they will give you such a beautiful insight into that period, 1890, 1903, depends, you know, whichever. They're being reprinted, so you find them in all the bookshops. Now, this is a view of Sardar Sujan Singh's palace. He was one of the richest men in the city in the late 1880, 1890, and his basically he earned his money, or he came into money because he was doing work for the British, supplying anything and everything to the army and to the railways, which were being built and extended into this part of the thing. Now, today as it stands, it is a very sad picture, but if you ever went into the city and you saw still some of the metal work, it is exquisite. It's like pieces of jewelry. Next, please. This is just a temple in the Qila, which still stands, but it's locked, so one can't go inside it. Hindu temple. Now, amongst the Sikhs who did a tremendous job was a man called Bhabra Singh. Bhabra Singh built this Niti High School, and it's got lovely stone carvings on the pillars here, and the next picture is also of it. But he was a tremendous educationalist, and he did remarkable work in the field of education. And when he built this school, he gave it to the government on the one thing, he wanted two things to be done. One, at assembly every morning there should be a universal prayer, a prayer which applied to the Hindu, the Sikh, the Christian, the Muslim, across the board. You had to say this prayer. And once a week, then very strictly lessons had to be given on values and morals and ethics, which I think we all, so many have learned, are educated, but our values and things have gone out of the window. So it's Srishniti High School. It still stands. It's a government school. Next. And this is where the principal sat, and you can see all the, normally it's kept covered, but all the people who donated money, their names were written on these plaques. His chair still sits there, stays there. Next. This is Masjid Road. The mosque is one of the oldest mosques in the city, Jamia Masjid Mosque, Banni, near Banni. Next. Now we come to Rawalpindi Cantonment, all right. These were the liners. This one particularly was also named Rawalpindi, which brought the India mail and passenger service to the subcontinent. Whether they were soldiers or officers, they all came on liners like this. Next. Now we are in the cantonment of Rawalpindi, and you will be seeing some of the houses and offices and the type of structure which was built during the days of the British Raj. This is a brigade mess. Next. This is the residence of the Murray Brewery manager. It's a charming house and it's got beautiful trees, and it's just on next to the Murray Brewery. But again, you can't really see it because of the walls that have gone up. You know, there was a time that you could walk into any of these places, photograph, picnic, do what you want, and now, of course, it's a very sad state. Next, please. This is, I showed you the Raja of Punch Sarai. Now the Raja of Punch used to come and live in the Punch house. This was his winter residence, which is still there, very much intact, and I think it's a government office, but it still stands there. This is Canning Road, the mall, then you go down Canning Road, Gurkson. Sorry? It's on Adamji Road. Adamji was, thank you so much, Adamji was one of the renowned names, one of the renowned Muslim families of Rawalpindi. This is the GOC Northern Command. Sorry. Because of the army which came in, into this area in the 1860 onwards, there was a complete division in Rawalpindi, and this is the house of the general officer commanding. Ayub Khan lived in it, I think Bhutto also lived in it, and now Musharraf lived in it, and now the present chief lives in it. Next. This is another view of it. It's quite lovely. This is Park House, which belonged to, which is the office of the Murray Brewery. The Murray Brewery was started in 1860. They had their brewery here in Rawalpindi, as well as on the way to Murray. And since then, they have been producing beer and other items. Now, talking of, I mentioned again, the name comes up, Mohan Singh. Mohan Singh residence. Now, there were Sujan Singh, there was, and Sujan Singh's son was Hardeep Singh, and he died very young, and these two boys were made court, the court took care of them. At Partition, both of them lived here, Mohan Singh and Sohan Singh, and it was, because my father was also in the army, he had met Mohan Singh, and when they got married in 1940, my parents came and lived in this house. They had an out guest house, and they described the inside as being an absolute museum. He was a real collector, a collector of clocks, a collector of books, you name it, and it was there. And in fact, when Partition took place, he sent a message to my father and said, please occupy it and just take everything, give the pay to the servants and so. And father just said no, because it was just too much of a risk. What was inside was fit for any museum, and the times were difficult, and it was all looted. We were in a school close by, Marion School, and I remember being told, go in, because the place was being looted by just ruffians. Next. It is now the Fatima Jinnah University, and it's being fortunately taken care of. His emblems are still on, the picture's not so good, but his emblems, family emblems, still stand. And in fact, when they left, they came back, a member of his family came back in Ziaul Haq's period, and they asked Ziaul Haq if they could access something at the place, and Zia said, certainly, whatever you want, you can go in. And they went into the house, a particular place, they had it broken, and they kept the jewelry there. And so then they were allowed, to take it back. But I mean, they were one of the very, very, very few who had that privilege. Beautiful tile work again around in the veranda. Next. Now, Gordon College was started in 1893, and it's one of the oldest institutions in Rawalpindi, and was started by the American Presbyterians. And they did some remarkable work, not only in education, but till today they work with the leper organization, leper hospital, which is in the city. So this is Gordon College, which is beautiful arches. Next. Another view of it. Next. And this is Station School. This is Station, and I say special care because I went to this school and I did my senior Cambridge, not in 1899, but in 19 whatever. But again, this was for the European, for the British officers' children, Station School. Then there was the convent, the Catholic convent, but this is a glimpse of that. Yes, next. Now, talking of schools, there were many other schools as well, but running short of time. Now, in 1876, 1879, the railway line came to Rawalpindi, and in 1886, it was open to traffic. So you see the Rawalpindi, and primarily the railway line was brought again because of the threat of war from Afghanistan, and they wanted to open up this area. So this is Rawalpindi station. Next, please. Another glimpse of the railway station exterior. Next. Now, this was the Amir of Afghanistan was given a parade here. This is going back to the early part of this of last century, and you can see the people, the soldiers lined up for the parade, which was held for him on his arrival. Next, the good old steam engine. Next, please. The station master in his shorts. Obviously summer, but wearing his boots and next, solar topi. This is what the Rawalpindi station looks like today. Next. 2 wars had been fought in 1838 and in 1878. In 1919, the third Afghan war took place, and you'd think that they had learned not to tackle the Afghans, and they haven't learned their lesson because we are still, but this was the delegation which came in 1920 to sign the peace treaty, and Rawalpindi also had the Amir Shah Shuja in exile, living in Pindi in the Kotwali, but the building doesn't stand now. So this is the delegation. The next one, please. There's another picture of the Afghan and the British part of the delegation. Amir Abdul Rahman. Thank you. Next, please. Is that the end?